Hey guys, my name is Caden, and today we will be talking about what Braille is. I guess we can start with the actual definition. This is the definition from Google, but I'm going to expand on this. So Google says that Braille is a form of written language for blind people in which characters are represented by patterns of raised dots which are felt with the fingertips. I do totally agree with this, but I have a couple more points to talk about here. A lot of people might think that Braille is just a lot of random dots on a page, but when you are blind, that is how you read and write. And for me, I use Braille to do all of my assignments in school, or read books, or even when using my Note Touch, which is a device that I showed off last video. So Braille is a code for me to read print tactilely. So basically, as I mentioned before, it's just a bunch of dots. It's like 4 dots put together. Combinations of different dots mean letters. And so I can feel those combinations of dots and tell what letter they are, and then those letters make up a word. So Braille might just sound like, oh, this kind of easy thing, but Braille has a lot more things than print does in terms of complications. So Braille includes something called a contraction, which is basically a short form to show a word in print. So we have alphabetical contractions, which most letters in the alphabet represent a word if they're standing alone. So for example, if you have a standing alone B, it means the word but. If you have C, it's can, D is do, E is every. But if you have a word like cage and E is at the end of the word, it is not a contraction because there's no spaces around it. It's not standing alone. I am going to show some technology that I use to use Braille. So you did learn a little bit about the Note Touch, but this is my Note Touch right here. And right here is called the refreshable Braille display, which is what shows me what's on the screen, but I can read it in Braille. And it's called refreshable because the dots go up and down to display different text because you can't fit the entire screen on this little line of Braille. So they need to use something that can, when you press the buttons to go to the next line, it can take me to the next line. It also includes a display, which is the screen right here, so print readers or my teachers can see what I'm doing on my Note Touch. I also have a device called the Standard Perkins Brailler. I will show you an image right now because I do not have that one currently with me. So the Standard Perkins Brailler is basically the base of Braille. It's something that a lot of people consider a typewriter, but it's really not. You see this keyboard here. A Standard Perkins Brailler has the same keys, but it's not a refreshable Braille display like this. You actually load paper into the device, and then the Brailler pokes little holes in the paper to make raised dots for me to be able to feel. So the Standard Perkins Brailler was the first Braille device. Okay, so the difference between the Note Touch and the Brailler, as I mentioned before, the Note Touch is like opening up a Word document on your computer and then typing in that and then emailing it off to wherever it needs to go, its destination. But with the Brailler, you load the paper into the machine, and then maybe you will bring that to somebody, like maybe a birthday card, but it's actually on paper. And the Note Touch, everything is digitally. There's also a device called the embosser, which is basically a Braille printer. So my EA at school, my Brailleist, she embosses things so that I can read them. For example, if I have a science worksheet, I can read the questions from my science worksheet on actual paper with the embosser. It's basically like the Perkins, but you control it with your computer. So you can print Word documents into Braille, and the machine pokes little holes into the paper, making it tactile. So as I did mention before, there's contractions, like the alphabetic contractions. There also are many more contractions, such as words like sometime, spirit, day. There's many of them, and for example, day is what we call a .5 and then a D. if you notice here on these little keys, you have your dot 1, 2, 3, and then your dots 4, 5, 6. So you would have to press dot 5, and then D, which is dots 1, 4, 5. And that's how I would write day. So Braille can be faster than print in a way, but not totally. There's basically 3 different levels of Braille. You have grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. I personally know and use grade 2 on a regular basis because grade 3 is very rare. Although it would be interesting for me to learn, it would not be very useful sometimes because not many people know it. So I would not be able to use it in school because my transcribers would not know how to do it unless they took the correct courses. There's also many different codes of Braille. For example, on my Note Touch, I usually use Literary Braille, which is UEB, Unified English Braille. But there's also something called Computer Braille, which is basically an easier way for me to use the @ symbol and numbers and things like that in email addresses or searching URLs, for example, on my Note Touch. This all may sound very confusing, but in my lifetime, I have learned technically 4 different languages of Braille. You have Braille Music, Unified English Braille, EABE, which was the old Braille code, which I started to learn, and then they decided to change it to EB, making my life even more difficult. And then I also know Computer Braille. So Braille Music, as I mentioned before, I just said how I know Braille Music. I don't totally know it because it's very confusing, but when I use Braille Music to play the tuba or the piano, it's completely different from Literary Braille. So it's like I have to throw everything that I know out and to the side and then think about only Braille music. For example, all of the different signs in music are different than Literary Braille. A whole C, for example, is actually a Y in real Braille, like in Literary Braille. It's very, very confusing. There are many more concepts to Braille, but it would probably take me a very, very long time to explain them all. So if you do have any questions, please comment below this video on YouTube or on my Facebook, which you can find the link to down in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you learned something new about Braille. And I'm just going to leave you with one simple quote: Braille is not just dots on a page.